The glass shattered first, not from accident, but from temper. "Don't you ever touch my whiskey again, boy." Harold's voice thundered through the marble dining room, and every head turned toward Marcus, the 17-year-old stepson, whose only mistake had been clearing the glasses too slowly. The guests froze, forks suspended mid-air, while Harold pointed at the young man as though he were dirt on his imported rug. "You think just because your mother married up, you belong here? You'll never be one of us." A tense silence followed. Marcus's knuckles whitened as he clutched the tray, his dark skin glowing beneath the chandelier's glare. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but his mother's trembling eyes stopped him. She gave a small shake of her head, silently begging him not to respond. The humiliation burned hotter than the lights. Follow if you want to see what happens when truth flips the script, and subscribe so you don't miss the next twist. The dinner resumed awkwardly, the laughter forced, the air heavy with unease. But Harold was just getting started. "You see," he announced to the table, swirling his drink with smug confidence, "some people think you can buy class. But it's in the blood, not in the color." His guests chuckled politely, unsure whether to agree or look away. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he stayed still, standing behind his chair like a servant in his own home. His mother, Angela, lowered her eyes to her plate. She had loved Harold once, or thought she did. He'd been charming at first, the kind of man who could turn a room with his smile. But the charm wore thin the moment the honeymoon ended and the house staff learned who Marcus was. "The help's son," they whispered, except he wasn't. He was hers, her blood, and Harold knew that. He just didn't care. Later that night, when the guests were gone, Harold tossed his jacket over the chair and said casually, "You'll thank me one day, Angela. The boy needs to know his place. He's not cut out for this world." She turned to him slowly, her eyes wet. "You mean our world, Harold?" He smiled coldly. "No, mine." Marcus heard it all from the hallway, his heart pounding. Every word chipped away at something inside him. Something that used to believe kindness always won. He walked to his room and stared out the window at the estate lights blinking across the hill. Beyond that hill was a city that never looked back at him. But somewhere beyond that city, he promised himself, was a life he'd build that no one could mock. He sat at his small desk, opening a battered laptop that still bore fingerprints from years of second-hand use. He worked on a project he never told Harold about, a design portfolio that had begun to gain attention online. It wasn't much yet, just sketches, concepts, and prototypes. But the right person had recently seen it, the kind of person who could change everything. Downstairs, Harold's laughter echoed again, mixing with the faint sound of classical music. "That boy," he said to a friend on the phone, "he's a lost cause. Thinks he's some kind of genius. The only thing he'll inherit from me is a mop." Marcus didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just kept typing, because deep down, he already knew something Harold didn't. The estate Harold bragged about wasn't as untouchable as it seemed, and the key to its future didn't belong to him anymore. He smiled faintly at his screen. "Not out of revenge, but resolve. Keep laughing," he whispered. "One day you'll realize who's really writing your future." Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, a quiet storm had just begun. Morning light spilled across the white marble floors. Sharp and cold, like the house itself, Marcus stepped into the kitchen quietly, his movements careful, like someone trespassing in his own home. The servants avoided eye contact. They had heard everything the night before. Word traveled fast when it came to humiliation. Harold sat at the breakfast table in a perfectly pressed robe, the morning paper stretched wide. He didn't look up when Marcus entered. "Coffee," Harold said flatly. Marcus blinked. "Excuse me?" I said coffee. "You were already standing there. Might as well be useful." Marcus stared at him for a moment, then turned toward the counter. He could feel his mother's eyes on him. She was sitting silently across from Harold, her face pale, her lips pressed together. She wanted to intervene, but couldn't, not after last night. He poured the coffee carefully, his hands steady despite the tremor in his chest. When he placed the cup on the table, Harold finally looked up. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he asked quietly, almost conversationally. Marcus didn't answer. That look in your eyes? I've seen it before. Ambition. Arrogance. He smiled without warmth. You'll learn soon enough that not everyone gets to win in this world. Marcus wanted to tell him that ambition wasn't arrogance, it was survival. But instead, he walked away. He had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. Outside, the day was alive with the distant sound of gardeners trimming hedges and cars purring through the driveway. Marcus sat on the stone steps near the garage, scrolling through his laptop. His latest 3D model glowed on the screen, a clean, futuristic architectural design. He had submitted it to an international contest weeks ago. If he won, it could fund his college education. He didn't dare tell Harold. Angela stepped out, holding a cup of tea. Her eyes were swollen. You didn't deserve that last night, she whispered. Marcus smiled weakly. You don't have to apologize for him, Mom. I'm not, she said quickly. But you have to be careful. He's been different lately. Meaner. He nodded, though his eyes stayed on the screen. I can handle him, she hesitated. Marcus, please. I promise, he said softly. I'm not going to let him break me. The next week, Harold hosted a small luncheon for his business partners, powerful men who admired him for his confidence and wealth. Marcus was ordered to serve drinks. Each time he entered the room, Harold's tone changed, becoming performative. This is my stepson, he'd say with exaggerated patience. Still trying to find his place, aren't you, Marcus? The men chuckled, their eyes flicking to Marcus with that polite pity people reserve for someone beneath them. Marcus kept his head down, repeating a quiet mantra in his mind. Just wait. As he cleared plates, he overheard one of the guests ask, So he's not your blood, then? Harold smirked. No, thank God. The boy's got a good heart, but wrong background, you know? My wife brought him in from her first marriage. I'm just trying to teach him some refinement. Laughter followed. Marcus's hand tightened around the tray until his knuckles went white. When he walked out of the room, he caught his reflection in the hallway mirror, his face calm, unreadable. Inside, though, something was shifting. A quiet fury, a decision forming. That night, Marcus opened his laptop again. The email notification blinked in the corner of the screen. Subject, Congratulations, Marcus Grant, winner of the Innovate Future Design Award. He froze. For a second, the words didn't make sense. Then his heart raced. He had won. The email explained that his project had been selected from over 2,000 entries. The sponsors wanted to meet him and possibly offer an internship with a global development firm. His hands shook as he scrolled down. The meeting was scheduled for next week. He looked around the room, his small corner filled with sketches, notes, and fragments of dreams. The taste of vindication was sweet but fragile. He couldn't tell Harold yet. Not until it was real. Days passed. Marcus worked quietly, preparing for the meeting. But Harold noticed his late nights and secretive phone calls. One evening, as Marcus was leaving the study, Harold stopped him in the hallway. What are you sneaking around for? Just schoolwork. You think I'm stupid? Harold stepped closer, the smell of whiskey heavy on his breath. You've been using my electricity, my internet, my roof? For what? Playing pretend engineer. Marcus stayed silent. Harold laughed. I looked through your computer. Nice drawings. You think these childish sketches are going to make you rich? Marcus froze. You went through my laptop? I own this house. That means everything in it belongs to me. Harold's smile sharpened. Including your little fantasies. Marcus swallowed hard, rage clawing at his throat. You had no right. Oh, I had every right. Harold leaned closer. Let me save you some embarrassment. Those people won't take you seriously. You don't have the right connections. You'll always be the boy your mother dragged in from the wrong side of town. Angela appeared at the top of the stairs, her voice trembling. Harold, please stop. He turned, dismissing her. No, he needs to hear this. He needs to know how the world works. Marcus stepped back, fists tight, trying not to explode. He wanted to scream. Instead, he walked past Harold, straight out the front door, into the cold night. He wandered through the dark gardens until he reached the old oak tree near the property's edge, his escape spot. He sat on the damp grass, pulling out his phone. The award letter was still open. Proof that he wasn't nothing. Proof that his worth didn't depend on anyone's permission. that his worth didn't depend on anyone's permission. Angela found him there an hour later. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have protected you better." He turned, resting his head against her shoulder. "You did your best." She kissed his forehead. "Your best is coming, baby. I can feel it." He didn't reply, but she was right. The next chapter of his life was already unfolding, quietly and powerfully, in places Harold would never expect. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Harold stood by the window, watching the faint glow of Marcus's phone across the lawn. "Ungrateful boy," he muttered. But deep inside, something pricked him, a strange, almost imperceptible unease. Because for the first time, when he looked at Marcus, he hadn't seen a powerless kid, he had seen a threat. The rain started just as Marcus buttoned his suit jacket. It wasn't much, just a whisper of drizzle against the glass, but it gave the morning a quiet, cinematic gloom. He stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. The same face he'd seen all his life, but something was different now. The eyes no longer looked defeated. His mother appeared in the doorway, her expression soft but proud. "You look just like your father," she said quietly. Marcus turned. "Do you really think so?" Angela smiled. "He would have been proud of you, baby. Of everything you've done, and how you've done it." Marcus exhaled slowly, adjusting his tie. Today wasn't just an award ceremony. It was proof that he mattered, that his talent had weight, that he wasn't just Harold's project. But of course, Harold didn't see it that way. He appeared behind Angela, holding a cup of coffee, wearing that familiar smirk. "So this is the big day? The fantasy convention?" Marcus bit back a sigh. "It's an award presentation. For drawings?" Harold chuckled. "Imagine if real life worked like that. People just handed out money for daydreaming." Angela's voice was firm for once. "He earned it, Harold. Leave him alone." Harold set the cup down. "Relax. I'm just teasing the kid." He turned toward Marcus, his tone suddenly smooth. "Tell you what, son, why don't I drive you there myself? I'd love to see what kind of people celebrate." "Innovation." Marcus hesitated. There was no good way to say no without sounding ungrateful. "Fine," he said finally. The ride was silent for most of the way. The car's interior smelled of leather and control. Harold's hand rested on the steering wheel, tapping lightly to a rhythm only he could hear. "You nervous?" he asked suddenly. "No, you should be. Rooms like that, they eat people alive, especially kids who don't belong there." Marcus turned his face toward the window, watching the city blur by. "Maybe they'll make an exception," Harold laughed softly. "That's the thing about exceptions, Marcus. They don't last." The hotel hosting the event was all glass and gold trim, every surface gleaming like money. Inside, the air buzzed with quiet sophistication. People in tailored suits, cameras flashing, the faint clinking of champagne glasses. Marcus checked in at the reception desk. "Marcus Grant," he said. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled warmly. "Ah, Mr. Grant, we've been expecting you. Congratulations again." Harold raised an eyebrow, amused. "Mr. Grant? Sounds fancy." Marcus ignored him. As they entered the ballroom, Harold's smirk widened. "You sure you're in the right place? These people look like they own half the city." Marcus's reply was simple. "Maybe one day I will." The ceremony began. Lights dimmed, applause rose, and names were called. When Marcus's name echoed across the hall, winner of the Innovate Future Design Award, Marcus Grant. He froze for half a heartbeat. Then, slowly, he walked toward the stage. The host shook his hand warmly. Cameras flashed. Marcus felt the warmth of validation spread through him, years of quiet struggle finally finding their echo. "Your design was extraordinary," said one of the judges. An older woman with silver hair and an expensive smile. "It reminded us of early works by your father, James Grant. Are you related?" Marcus blinked. "He was my father." The room stirred, whispering. Someone else spoke from the front table. "James Grant? The late architect who co-founded Sterling Estates?" Harold's head snapped up. The silver-haired woman smiled. "That's fascinating. You know, our foundation still partners with Sterling Estates on several projects. I believe they still manage your family's old property?" Marcus didn't answer. He hadn't known that. Harold's face drained of color. "Wait," he said, stepping forward, forcing a laugh. "You must be mistaken. That estate belongs to me," the woman frowned politely. "Oh, you must be Mr. Harold Whitmore, then?" The current occupant? I see your name on the lease. Her tone changed, slightly cooler now. But yes, ownership has always remained under the Grant family trust. It's listed right here. The audience turned. Murmurs rippled through the room like static. Harold's voice cracked. What trust? Marcus turned toward him slowly. The one you said didn't exist. The ceremony took a surreal turn after that. Every conversation Harold tried to start was interrupted by polite, knowing glances. Someone whispered the words, stepfather and inheritance. The story was spreading faster than he could contain it. When Marcus returned to his seat, Harold grabbed his wrist. You knew about this, didn't you? He hissed. Marcus met his gaze calmly. I found out today, same as you. Don't lie to me. Harold's voice rose, drawing stares. Angela, sitting behind them, reached forward. Harold, stop! But Harold wasn't listening. You think this changes anything? You think money or some paperwork makes you better than me? Marcus stood up. No, he said evenly. It just makes things clearer. The tension shattered when a man in a gray suit approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, before we conclude, I'd like to make a special announcement. His voice carried the weight of authority, the tone of someone used to being listened to. As many of you know, Sterling Estates has undergone an ownership audit this quarter. Our records confirm that Mr. Marcus Grant is the direct heir to the Grant Family Trust, including all associated properties. Gasps filled the room. Harold froze, his breath catching. The man continued. That includes the Whitmore residence. Currently under lease, effective ownership remains under the Grant estate. The applause that followed wasn't just for Marcus's design anymore. It was for justice long overdue. Harold's face twisted. Disbelief, rage, humiliation. He stumbled toward Marcus. You did this to me, he whispered. You planned this. Marcus looked at him, calm, composed. I didn't plan anything. I just stopped apologizing for being who I am. He stepped past Harold, the crowd parting for him like a quiet tide. Cameras followed his movement, not Harold's. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered on the pavement, reflected in Marcus's steady eyes. He didn't smile, not yet. Victory wasn't the point. Freedom was. And tonight, he had taken the first step toward it. The courtroom was silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Marcus stood tall beside his lawyer, a quiet strength radiating from him that had not been there before. His stepfather, Gerald Whitmore, sat slumped in his chair, the once proud man who used to boast about his legacy, now reduced to a shadow of it. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of long-hidden truths. Judge Harris cleared his throat. After reviewing the documents presented, the ownership transfer, the signed partnership agreement, and the trust left by Mr. Whitmore Sr., this court recognizes Marcus Daniels as the rightful co-owner of Whitmore Industries. A collective gasp swept across the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. Gerald's jaw tightened. His skin flushed with humiliation as he glanced toward Marcus, the boy he had belittled, mocked, and once called a mistake. Marcus didn't look back with triumph. He didn't even smile. He simply closed his eyes for a moment, as though remembering the boy who used to sit outside Gerald's office, waiting for scraps of approval that never came. Outside the courthouse, the world erupted with noise. The same tabloids that once painted Marcus as a lucky orphan now hailed him as a business visionary. But he didn't care for headlines. He walked down the marble steps and paused in the sunlight, the same light that had watched him through every injustice. Reporters shouted his name. Microphones stretched toward him. Mr. Daniels, how does it feel to inherit the empire of the man who disowned you? He took a breath. It's not about inheritance, he said calmly. It's about integrity. What my stepfather built was power. What I'll build from here is purpose. Behind him, Gerald struggled through the crowd, his pride shattered, but his eyes full of regret. Marcus, he called out, his voice cracking. I made mistakes. For a moment, Marcus turned, not as a son seeking affection, but as a man who finally understood his worth. The years of humiliation, the taunts, the silent dinners, the cold shoulders, all of it dissolved in that single moment of clarity. I know, Marcus said softly. But some mistakes take a lifetime to repair. Take a lifetime to repair. Gerald's eyes lowered. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to defend. The reporters caught the moment, not as a scandal, but as a quiet redemption captured under the afternoon sun. Later that evening, Marcus visited the estate. The grand marble halls echoed with ghosts of his childhood, the echoes of laughter that were never his, the dinners he wasn't invited to, the locked doors that kept him outside. But now every light was on. Every corner felt open, as if the house itself exhaled after years of silence. He walked into the study, where a portrait of Gerald's late wife, Marcus's mother, hung above the fireplace. Her gentle eyes seemed to follow him. "We did it, Mom," he whispered. Not with revenge, but with truth. He poured himself a glass of water, not champagne, and stood by the window. The city lights glittered below, a reflection of how far he had come from the boy who once believed he was unwanted. His mother's dream, of her son being respected, not pitied, had finally come true. A knock came on the door. It was Officer Lang, the off-duty cop who had stood up for Marcus when things first went wrong. "Didn't think I'd see the day, huh?" he said with a smile. Marcus chuckled. "Neither did I. But I guess the universe was waiting for me to stop proving myself to people who never cared." Lang nodded. "And now, Marcus said, turning toward the massive estate, "I use this place for something real. Scholarships, mentorships, maybe a home for kids who never got a chance." "That's what this inheritance means," the officer grinned. "That's the kind of empire that lasts." As Lang left, Marcus returned to the study. He reached for a framed photo of his mother and held it close, the firelight dancing across his face. There was peace, not the quiet of surrender, but the stillness of justice fulfilled. Weeks later, newspapers ran a new headline. From Stepson to CEO, Marcus Daniels redefines the Whitmore legacy. And beneath it, an image, Marcus standing before the same mansion where he was once mocked, now surrounded by children from the community he'd vowed to support. The gates that once symbolized exclusion were now open, welcoming others in. In the end, Gerald's downfall wasn't Marcus's victory. It was his awakening. The young man the world once overlooked had not just inherited a fortune, he had inherited his voice, his dignity, and his power to forgive. As the camera of fate panned out one last time, the estate glowed against the night sky, no longer a symbol of arrogance, but of redemption. Marcus stood in the doorway, calm and proud, a silhouette against the light, not a boy seeking belonging, but a man who had found it within himself. Subscribe for more powerful stories of truth, justice, and resilience. Your voice keeps stories like this alive.